Now, see, like, people are looking at hard-coding all these things. Make them in elevation plus 7 degrees. There's still lots of ways that could end up colliding with ourselves, again, with, like, because if we decide to have it spawn deeper inside the barrel or change the hitboxes, all these things restore other problems. Now, I'm not saying that, like, we necessarily want to prevent all self-hits forever, but if then the solution becomes make sure it doesn't detonate, like, check to make sure it's left us one time before it fires. But this is going to be okay. So you host, and you play. Oh, client. Boom. So, yep, you're taking damage over here. You just confirm. There you go. So over here we're down to 60. So then if I turn this way and shoot at this fool, boom, 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 boom. There we go. And we can still do tons of damage to ourselves. Thump, 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 thump. And we're dead. I do like the little bouncy bullets. Oh. That's a bug. Right. The bullets didn't explode because here they tried to get the source tank rigid body 2D, and that resulted in error, so the bullets never got around to exploding. We have to make sure if source tank is not equal to null, and this. Because otherwise the bullets stop blowing up when we hit the ground. But now we should be okay. So if I do this. Boom, 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 boom. Good. Okay. Yeah, bullet on no collision there for the first half second would also be ideal. I mean, realistically, that's how things like torpedoes work. They actually have to, like, they have to be active for a couple of seconds or whatever before they self-arm. In real life, because, and that's not a case of, like, don't hit yourself. It's also, what if you happen to hit someone who's, like, right next to you, or there's, like, a rock or something, or a piece of debris in the water, and you launch your torpedo, and then it, like, explodes right next to your ship at sea, and then you sink yourself. Stop sinking yourself. And so that would be it. Yeah. And you could just, you can either do a check in the if, or you can have an update that switches one layer, like from inactive bullets to active bullets layer. But I think this is probably the one that leads to the right gameplay. Can you make the bullet go in first collision with the source tank? Of course you could. But would that be correct? Think about it. Because the first collision could be a very legitimate one. Because we don't know that it's going to self-collide every time. So that's not necessarily going to be the right one. If you can guarantee that the bullet is always going to start off inside of your tank's collider, then you always ignore the first collision, sure. But again, what if you move the bullet spawn point to outside the collider at some point, and then all of a sudden, that first collision is one that it's supposed to detonate. So there's gotchas. And yeah, the bullet rotation we turned off. We had that here. We're going to have to tune something there. So now, if I've got the proper rotation through the firing arc, now, boo! So now it looks nice. That's what we had before. You know, it'll point down, coming down. The problem is, and I guess it's less of a problem now that the bullets actually ignite or blow up when they hit the ground. They were doing some very funny sort of like rotation, sliding looking things on the ground, but I guess it doesn't matter anymore. If we do get another bullet that like doesn't explode when it hits the ground. And we can very easily imagine that situation. Get a bullet that it doesn't explode when it hits the ground. Instead, it only explodes when it hits a tank. Or if it like runs out of speed or a timer goes out. Then we're going to have the like weird sort of sliding looky kind of thing onto the ground. But I think what we do at that point is we set this to only update the rotation above a certain speed, or maybe while it's not touching the ground. That's another possibility. We can just simply make it like not change its rotation like through our code while it's touching the ground, because then instead it'll like roll or something. All that will be moot if our bullets that can go on the ground just happen to like look round or symmetrical as opposed to these. Then it doesn't matter. What we probably want even is some sort of like Boolean, right? Rotates with velocity. So these are for bullets that rotate with the velocity. So if rotates with the velocity, then that. Because really, it's only bullets that have like the tail fin and or long or, you know, aren't round or whatever that are going to be doing this sort of thing. So we could just do that. Just make it public. That's probably good. And then, anyway, then all these things go away. So we'll leave this on for now. And yeah, it'll mostly depend to like what kind of weapons do we create and what should each individual one look like. We don't know what all those use cases will be yet and what the correct solution or the most elegant solution will be. So we'll put that in there for now. Okay, so we have bullets. We don't have an explosion yet. Should we do an explosion graphic? More like MIRV warheads that don't explode. Oh, they had the old was it, the MIRVs did the MIRVs bounce? Because the MIRVs split. All right, they went up, and at the top of their arc, I think they split into multiple things. But you had a few different ones that like had bouncy effects in Scorched Earth. One of my favorite was it called like the Funky, where it would land and then it would go pew 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 with like really cool looking stuff. I think so. So I feel like almost we need to make a really low tech explosion for our Scorched Earth kind of clone. First of all, there needs to be, and this is the most important thing from a gameplay point of view, whatever the radius of the bullet is, we have to show that radius like very definitively as part of the explosion. So, you know, it's got a circle of a particular size. And more importantly, if we go and implement the Scorched Earth sort of worm style whatever, where like the explosion radius actually like removes the pixels from the ground right there, it's going to be important to have like that template very clear. And in addition to that, we can have like smoke and flame particles or whatever. But I think, like, it needs to circle wherever it is. Yeah, the Funky Bomb. God, I love that one so much. The Funky Bomb and the rubber bullets. Or, no, that wasn't rubber bullet. You could, like, play Scorched Earth in, like, a rubber room. If you want maximum chaos, what you do is, you set the room to rubber with no ground whatsoever. So every bullet you ever fire would just, like, bounce infinitely until it finally hit a tank. It's just pure random bullshit. I loved it. There's also a plan to show the target arc. I don't think you were going to preview what the arc is going to be, because I think that would make the game too easy. But there's no reason the bullet couldn't leave a trail as it traveled to sort of showcase that. A bunch of different ways to do it. You could do a line renderer, or you could have the bullet eject a certain type of particle as it goes that has a certain lifespan. So as it goes, almost like leaves a little bit of a contrail behind it. Really emphasize the arc. That would be okay. Which also you could actually just do with a line renderer, and I often do that sort of thing with it. I like using lava bullets. You could fill someone's shields with lava. Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Oh god, that game had so many great options. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new object. And this is going to be sort of the baseline explosion. I don't know if I'm going to call it explosion. It's almost like explosion radius. Like, it's the definitive, this is the thing that's going to be a circle as big as the radius. I think it'll probably grow as part of the explosion effect, but it'll be quite quickly. It'll sort of, and then maybe fade away. So I'll call it like bullet explosion. But I can see ourselves calling it different things. And ultimately, it's going to be, I'm going to just create a round sprite here. So create sprites circle. So it's just a circle sprite, and that's fine. And we're going to go and put that inside a bullet explosion. There we go. So we got a circle. And that's not really radius 1. Wow. I'm going to make sure the circle graphic is, oh my god. I hope the next version fixes this lack of focus thingy. We'll do that. Okay. That's really radius 1? Wow. That's big. Well, I mean, we don't know exactly how far we'll zoom out, but, I mean, I guess our tank only has about a length of 1. So with a radius of 1, it's like 2 tanks long. So a lot of the bullets, I think, will have smaller than 1 radius. They'll be like the nukes that have something crazy like this. Okay, so we got the sprite render on there. I mean, we can assume, I don't know, the color is supposed to be like reddish or something. Although, that's probably something that can change over time as well. So we're going to do sort of that kind of lo-fi kind of effect. Probably it'll be something like the core of the explosion. Because bullet explosion will probably have like particle effects and all kinds of different things. But this is going to be the core part of it that's supposed to grow to the size of the radius. So, bullet explosion, I think, is going to have its own custom script called bullet explosion. And it's going to be fed in a value, which has to be public, float, radius. Tell it how big. And they'll have some other things that we'll probably make public so we can edit in the inspector later. But for now, I'm just going to do something like fade in time. So, well, fade in isn't entirely right because it's mostly going to be grow time, but and then fade out time. And that might be a little bit more accurate because it'll fade out slower. I think it'll actually do like alpha out as it goes. Public game object. Yeah, game object is fine. Core graphic. So if we go back over here, and I mean, it could find its own. And I do actually tend to like writing the code in such a way that it finds its own values over here. We'll have the radius default to 1. And just to remind myself, I'll set it like that. But the idea is when we spawn this, we're going to set the radius to the appropriate thing for this particular explosion. And what I'm going to do is something like this. If fade in time is greater than 0. So we're still in the process of fading in. Well, actually, do we even have to do something like this? Yeah, sure. Greater, well, what I want to do is for the core graphics, I want to grab the transform and set the local scale of this. I want this to grow based on the, I want it to start at size 0 and grow to size 1, whatever its correct radius is, over the course of fade in time. So I guess I'm going to need a float, which is going to be something like R for the correct radius. And I guess I have to track what the initial fade-in time was, don't I? There we go, something like that. So the radius is going to be radius multiplied by the inverse of fade in time left divided by fade in time. So, and as part of the update process, this shrinks by time.delta time. So let me check this. This shrinks, so this will approach 0. So 0 over blah becomes 0. So 1 minus 0 is 1. So at that point, we get the full radius. Now, we don't want this to ever go negative. So what we'll actually do is something like mathf.clamp. Mathf.max of fade in time left minus that. Or 0. It's going to grab the bigger one of those two, which means we can never get smaller than 0 over here. So local scale needs to be a vector. What you can do for this, is do a vector, the vector 1 multiplied by r. I think that'll work. I'm probably screwing up the math because it'd be easier. Wouldn't it be easier in a coroutine? No. The answer is always, would blank be easier in a coroutine? The answer is always no. I mean, you could do it, but there's no difference functionally between one or the other. I mean, the difference, because you're still going to have to keep track of these two numbers. You would just have a yield in between your loop. You'd have some sort of loop with a yield in it, which is exactly the same as, this is our loop. The yield is implied. This is literally the same as a coroutine. Where update is a loop, and this is our yield. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. So, our fade in is really just a grow. And it'll just hold it there. I mean, technically, we only need to evaluate this as long as it's, was positive and becomes negative. But, and I guess we could, just in case this ends up being sort of like intensive, we could say something like, if fade in time left is greater than 0, then we bring it down and shrink. There we go. So, man, at some point, it'll become 0 within this loop, and that's okay. And then the same thing happens. So, and then I guess technically we can return here. Because then, if we get to here, it means all the fade in is complete. So now we can start the fade out. And we'll do the same sort of logic. If fade out time is greater than 0, then we do the same sort of thing. Make sure it can't go below 0. And we just set the, I would say we set the alpha value. So for core graphic, we get component. Again, this is not super fast, but Unity, I think as of version blah, does pretty good internal caching for this. So we can grab the sprite like this, and it'll cache it internally and do a pretty quick shortcut for this. So it's not as slow as it used to be. It's actually just almost as fast as doing it locally. Dot color. Oh wait, I'm thinking of it wrong. It's not sprite at this point. It's sprite renderer. Renderer. Dot color. Because you can't just get the alpha. Yeah, dot color. So what we do is color C is equal to this. You can't change it directly. C dot A, the alpha, is equal to this. And we actually don't want to invert. So, oops, this should be left. Fade out time left. And the only reason I need to like separate these two is because we were doing this division over here. So fade out time left shrinks, and so when fade out time has a lot of time left, we're returning a value close to 1, which means we get full alpha. And as it shrinks towards 0, the thing becomes more and more and more invisible. And then I guess we could return again. That's fine. If we get here, all the fade in out animation is done. We can destroy ourselves unless we have particle children. So to do that, to verify. But assuming we get here, we'll just, for now, we'll just go ahead and destroy the explosion effect. And also, you know, to do remove pixels, remove ground pixels. So it's going to be right there. We fade in, remove the ground pixels, and then fade out the explosion, revealing the missing ground. And then we do this. So probably if we do spawn any sort of particle effects, we're not going to want to spawn them as children. They're going to want to have their own like babysitting value or some damn thing like that. Boom, boom, boom. I got some. Why can't you do that? I can't initiate things this way. That's no good, right? Oh, can I? I always like the syntax to do this sort of stuff between different languages. I think only one of them is going to get the value here. I mean, I could do it in the start. I think I have to go and do this, don't I? Can I just do, like, the equal for double initialization? No, I don't think so. There we go. That works. I've got to do the number twice. I probably want to do something in start. There's probably some other way to do it, actually, in C# to do the thing that I want, but can't remember off the top of my head. Thank you. Good catch. Hopefully that is that. Okay. So, you're going to go in here. And I guess our bullet code is going to have some sort of like public game object explosion prefab. So that way, when our bullet dash normal explodes, it'll have this prefab attached to it. So now what we need is a RPC. So RPC, remote procedure call, this is a function that runs on only on clients, not on the server. Although keep in mind, sometimes a client is also a server, but that's okay. So it's going to have a function here called something like, not spawn, because spawn needs something specific. Make explosion. Do explosion. Whatever. Do explosion over here. Boom, 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 boom. And actually, because by this time this resolves, will it still exist or will there be a weird timing thing? I think it'll be okay. But I'm wondering if we should be passing the position and radius here. It's probably fine. Oh, it's got to start with the word RPC as well, or we'll get yelled at. So RPC, do explosion, done. So the explosion, so at this point running on the client, because the thing is, this is only on the server, but this command is from the server to tell all the clients to run this code. And then all the clients will be like, yeah, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to instantiate our explosion. Like this. So, and I'm not going to spawn. I'm not going to call networkserve.spawn, which would create a networked object. The explosion is not going to be networked. Doesn't have to be. Just runs on every individual client at presumably the same place. You know what? Just to avoid any sort of bizarre weirdness, because there could be, because this would want to spawn wherever the client thinks the bullet is, which might conceivably be slightly out of sync with the server, depending on timing and things like that. So we do actually want to pass the position, which is actually a vector 2, and just in case, whatever, we'll pass the radius as well. Like this. Here, position. Let's use our big boy words. Boom, boom, boom. This dot transform dot position and radius. Done. Okay. So we're going to instantiate the explosion at the position. And then it's going to need a rotation. So we'll just give it identity. That's fine. Doesn't actually need a real rotation thing going on. And this is going to return game object go. And the game object, get, spell things correctly. Get component bullet explosion. If for some reason it doesn't have that component on it, someone's going to get fired. Radius is going to be equal to radius over here. And presumably, the bullet might have information about things like the position, other things. I guess we don't have to sync the radius. The bullet might have information about, you know, fade in, fade out times. Maybe different explosions have different colors. Other parameters that we can feed in there. Although, what we might just do is a custom bullet explosion prefab for different types of explosions. And the only thing, and so we might not even have to set the radius, because it might already be set. But this is easier because it gets to sync through it all, and it's okay. So now we should get an explosion graphic that is 2 units in radius. So quite a bit larger. Alright, well, let's see what happens. Oh, right, I took away the radius requirement over here. I'll find target object and then ID4 for RPC call. Ah! I think because the bullet destroys itself, hold on. Because this is destroying the bullet on the frame where the explosion happens. I think this queues up the RPC explosion call. So the bullet is sort of destroyed when it's trying to fire off the RPC. So, what's the answer there? I mean, we can have the bullet destroy itself here, but that doesn't actually remove it from the server. Again, a lot of times the client, the server will also be a client, so it'll be okay. I guess one option could be, well, that's not really a good option, but you could assume we had a sort of we have a server, an explosion manager. And so now the RPC isn't just set to the bullet. Because here, we send the RPC to the bullet object on each client. But instead of sending this message to the bullet object on each client, we could send the message to the explosion object, the explosion manager on each client. I mean, yeah, we can hide the bullet, we can do all kinds of things. You know, just hide it and then be delayed. But that feels really, that doesn't feel great. An effects manager kind of makes sense. And often is very appealing for a million different reasons. Like, you might want to have, like, a cap on how many objects and explosions and things are going on. And then, you know, having it through a single manager is a great way of doing that. I'm not super pleased with any of these. The managers are good. I mean, I guess there's no reason. The thing is, in a sense, it makes a lot of sense for the do explosion to take care of the destruction. Well, no, because it's a server. This bullet can only be destroyed by the server. Yeah, I think we do an explosion manager. I think that's probably fine and right. So then the only problem with that is with an RPC call, we can't send, I don't think we can send a prefab. You can send a reference to a game object that's got a network identity on it, but that's not what we want to do with the explosion. So now the explosion manager kind of needs, it would need an array of explosions. And then we tell it, hey, explosion manager, please do explosion number 18 at these coordinates. And that's fine, just slightly less convenient to keep track of. See what I mean? And yeah, the explosion, in a sense, could be something completely detached from the bullet. I mean, and it is. Once the explosion starts, the bullet is free to kill itself and just ignore it. I guess that's the way to do it. All right. I mean, the fact of the matter is, well, I was going to say, in a non-multiplayer game, that's how I do it. No, I'd still like to do the prefab being linked to this. There is one other option. Is we could have the server, instead of an RPC, we could have the server spawn the explosion right here as a networked object. Now all of a sudden, we do need to have in our network manager, in the list of things that can be spawned, we have the explosion object as something that can be spawned as part of the networked. No, that's really stupid, though. Okay, let's... How much time? Oh, man, it's 2. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to put a pin in it here. I'm going to put a pin in it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just comment this line out. To do. Put me back in. Actually, I'm going to put it here. And... yeah, I don't know. No, okay. We'll leave that there because that's what it's supposed to do. I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to comment all this out. And to do... use an FX manager. That's what we're going to do. But it's 2 p.m., so it's perfect. Our next tutorial will be to design this sort of FX manager that does a much better job of, like, the server can just call it something like FX manager dot do explosion, you know, my explosion type. Explosion type. Which maybe will be, maybe an enum, actually. We can have enums that define the explosions that way. That's actually becoming kind of handy, all of a sudden. You know, at position, with radius, whatever. In a sense, we could have the explosion itself do the damage. But I think this is fine. Well... now that's interesting. Because what's going to happen is any tanks that take damage are going to be damaged instantly when the bullet hits, and then the explosion graphic's going to grow. If I'm thinking back to how Scorched Earth worked, the sequence was quite a bit different. Well, no, that's okay, because what would happen is the explosion would happen, and then it would go away, and the tanks would fall, and then maybe some tanks would, like, explode again. Now, it doesn't mean we can't still affect the damage right away, but maybe what we do is we delay any animation of tanks exploding until the first explosion is done. We're going to have to figure that out. Exactly how we want to do it. But that'll be for next time. What we're going to do, we're going to take a short break here. In theory, I was only going to stream 2 hours today because I'm burnt from all the extra streaming this week. What we're going to do is we're going to try to sneak in a free-for-all game of StarCraft 2 to see if we can get it to work and be happy that way. Because we haven't tested it yet, and it would be great to do. StarCraft 2 is a fun game. It's free to play. Ooh, I am Katowice in 2 days. And Scarlet's going to be here. Oh, Queen of Blade. Okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going to derp around in here. We're going to try free-for-all. I think you can do 8 players. And yeah, we'll do that. But yeah, we're gonna have to figure out some sort of timing here. That might mean some sort of like event queue, right? Consider. Maybe we need to use an event queue to not do the damage until the explosion visuals and falling have fully been resolved. And then you even explode one at a time. Because some of these games, the tanks self-destruct as well, right? So if you have 2 people next to each other and one dies and explodes, it can actually hurt the other one and cause them to then die afterwards. We're going to have so much fun with this. I think we are going to use some sort of queuing system because an event queue like that is a powerful, powerful thing to do in games. It allows you to do tons of things. It lets you do replays in very cool ways. It lets you do undos in very cool ways. And it lets you do things where, well, we have to wait for an animation to finish before we do this. And just throwing coroutines at everything isn't the solution. You can use a coroutine to process your event queue, maybe. That's fine. But just coroutining by itself leads to, just sort of doing it blindly with, bizarre sort of delays to make sure everything syncs up right isn't the answer. So we're gonna pause this here, cut this here. I'm gonna make sure to upload this